Hello and welcome to our how-to series where we want to give you some tips on how to extend the life of your turf maintenance equipment. My name is Hans-Fritz Sievers. I'm the training manager for cutting edge training at Ransoms Jacobsen. Today we want to cover battery maintenance, which is a hot topic nowadays with all the golf car buggies going around. It is very easy to get a good life out of a battery if we follow a few simple steps. And these are: keep the battery clean at all times. Make sure that the battery electrolyte level or water level is at the correct level at all times. Keep the battery charged and make sure that all cable connections and the battery itself is always secure to prevent damage. Before we go into the actual battery maintenance, I just want to talk a bit about safety and the tools that we need to do this job. First of all, always wear gloves because we are working with an acid solution, and then of course always protect your eyes. The tools we're going to use are a few simple pieces of equipment. We will use insulated spanners due to electricity, and if you don't have an insulated spanner, at least wrap a wrench or a spanner with insulation tape. We would need a torque wrench in order to fix the cables to the battery, and this torque wrench has got to be able to go down to about 10 Newton meters. We will need some bicarb of soda to neutralize any acid spills, and we would mix that in a solution with water, around about 10 milliliters of bicarb mixed in a liter of water. We will need a wire brush in order to clean any connections. In order to fill up the battery, we will either need deionized water or distilled water. We will never add any acid to a battery. And then last but not least, a voltmeter in order to measure the charge and the voltage that is available in the battery. The first step in battery maintenance is to have a look and inspect the batteries weekly, if possible, otherwise at least monthly. We want to check the outside of the battery for any deformation, cracking, any fluids that are leaking, in order to make sure that it is secure and we don't have a spillage of acid. We also want to check that all connections on top are tight and clean. Cleaning the battery, it is very important that there is no dust or grime on top of the battery case, as this would allow shorting of the post to the earth and a self-discharge of the battery, leading to a loss of power and of course then the vehicle not performing to its full potential. During the charging process of a battery, there will be a release of hydrogen, and with the hydrogen there is also then some of the acid coming out of the battery, which then drops on top of the battery top. This acid of course is corrosive and will affect the surrounding part of the vehicle. We can't just wash this acid off, as it will just bring the problem further down the vehicle or even on the asphalt or concrete floor of the workshop. For that reason, we will neutralize the acid first, and as I mentioned earlier, we will use our solution of bicarb with water. Spray the whole top gently, and you will see a fizzing process happening there. This is the bicarb neutralizing the acid. We would leave that solution on top for about 3 minutes. Any stubborn dirt build up like we have got on this post here, we would brush off with a wire brush. Just making sure that all the connections are clear, down to metal, a bright metal again, and we don't have any build-up left. If we find after brushing that there is still some corrosion and sulfation left on top of the battery pack, we would repeat the whole process and spray some more solution on there just to neutralize that. As you can see here, there, it is still fizzing, hence there's still some acid on that. Leave that for another 3 minutes just to neutralize the acid and clean it well. When you're satisfied that all the dirt is off and loose, we can now wipe the top of the battery with a cloth, or we can spray it off with clean water, making sure that the water runs off completely, and then at the end dry the battery off with a cloth. During this whole process, make sure that the vent caps are always secure and tight on top of the battery to prevent any dirt going into the electrolyte level, which can cause an internal short. After we've cleaned the batteries and the battery tops, we also want to make sure that any cable connections are also clean. So what we would do is, with a wire brush them so we are down to bright metal, which will then, if we connect them up, make sure that we've got a secure and a proper connection between the battery post and the cable. We will then tighten that nut with an insulated spanner and ensure that we torque it to about 7 to 9 Newton meters. This is what happens if you do not have a correct connection and the connection becomes loose. Heat is formed at the point, and this can damage the post, melt the wire, and can cause an explosion. Afterwards, we would then spray a bit of battery terminal protector on top of that joint to protect it from the environment and prevent further or new corrosion in future. Now that the battery is clean, it is very important that the electrolyte level inside the battery is at the correct level at all times. In order to check that, we would carefully remove the vent cap, either the combi, or if it's a single vent cap, open them up. Always open them up away from you so you don't have acid spraying into your face or onto your clothes. We will then have to have a look at the level inside there. We can either do it visually or with a dipstick, so any non-metallic, non-conductive piece of material, and we want to make sure that there is some fluid above the lead plates. As we can see on this battery here, the left-hand cell is dry with a fluid level just below the plates. Before we go any further with this here, we will have to charge this battery up, and we will have to just fill up the fluid so it just covers the plates. Charge up the battery and then recheck it after charging. During the charging cycle, the electrolyte level actually rises inside the battery case. If we fill up the battery to its correct level before charging, we might actually boil out or discharge too much acid. After charging, we want to check the level again, and we then want it roughly 13 millimeters above the plate, which relates to about half an inch of electrolyte level above the plate. Always making sure that there is still a gap between the electrolyte level and the vent cap in order for the hydrogen to actually escape, as we can see on the diagram on my left. In order to fill up the water level inside the battery, we would either use distilled water or deionized water, and there are various ways of doing that. We could use a watering gun, which then measures a certain amount of fluid, or it actually cuts off when the correct level has reached, and we don't have to do any guessing. If we fill it in directly through the bottle, we have to keep on looking that we do get the correct level. Another great invention nowadays is a single point watering system, or a battery filling system, where we have got one point through a bottle where all the batteries in the pack are filled at the same time, and it has got a little float on each cell indicating to us what the level of water is inside the battery. After filling the batteries to the correct level, we would reinsert the vent cap, making sure that it's snug and tight in order to prevent any dirt coming into the system. Now that our batteries are clean, secured, enough electrolyte level in there, we want to charge them, and we want to charge the batteries after each day's use. Not use it for 5 minutes today and then charge it in a week's time again, because then we will never know how far it has been discharged, and we can permanently damage the batteries. Charging the batteries should be done in a well-ventilated area where we would circulate the air at least 5 times an hour. This is to prevent any buildup of hydrogen which is released during the charging cycle. And of course then be aware not to have any naked flames or allow any smoking nearby, anything that could cause a spark and ignite the hydrogen. When we charge the vehicle using a charger, we want to make sure that the connections into the vehicle and the connections into the power supply are clean, free from any debris, any moisture, and cannot cause any shorts. Always allow the charger to run for its full charging cycle, which should take about 6 to 8 hours with a maximum about 12 hours. Never allow the batteries to be overcharged, because there will be an excess of heat and an excess of gas formed, which could be dangerous, which could deform the batteries and damage them. Therefore, a charger should switch itself off at least every 24 hours. While we're on the power supply, we want a maximum of about 2 charges per fuse, so that if something goes wrong with the power supply, that only 1, maximum 2 charges are affected at that moment. It is a good idea to number the charges similarly as the vehicles are numbered, so that we can use, for example, charger number 1 only with vehicle number 1. In that case, we would prevent any possible damage that has occurred in a charger from being distributed throughout the fleet. Only 1 vehicle would be affected. Also, never undercharge the batteries, what we call opportunity charging, 5 minutes during the day when there's a break or something like that, because what happens inside the battery then is that the temporary sulfate, which is packed up on the plates, is not being released, and then forms permanent sulfate called stratification, which greatly reduces the effectiveness and the capacity of the battery. As I mentioned earlier, we want the full charging cycle to complete. On intelligent chargers like these, we have indication of where in the charging cycle we are. In this case, the amber light would go down, and then when it reaches the 80% and the proper charging cycle, it will flash green, and when it's finished, it will actually switch itself off. That is when we know that the charging cycle is complete. It is also a good idea to have a monthly equalizing charge. Equalizing charge will ensure that the individual cells within the batteries are brought up to more or less the same charging capacity. The easiest way to do that is, after a complete charging cycle, is to disconnect the DC cord from the vehicle, wait for the charger to switch off, reconnect it, and let it run through as a charging cycle again. This will be a short charge, and you repeat that process 3 times. As you have seen, there's not that much to battery maintenance, but I can guarantee you that if you keep everything clean, all the connections secure, you keep the electrolyte level to the correct level, and you keep your batteries charged, that you will have a long life out of your batteries. Thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful, and we look forward to seeing you soon again.